she built an empire. He tried to steal it all. Madeline Carter, a self-made millionaire, thought she had it all, until a brutal betrayal left her fighting for her life. Her own husband and trusted assistant plotted her murder. But when their plan failed, they waited for her to die. What they didn't know, she was awake, listening, planning her revenge. This is a story of deception, survival, and the ultimate payback. Will she take back what's hers? Watch till the end to find out. Where are you watching from? Subscribe now for more incredible stories. Madeline Carter's first awareness was pain. A deep, throbbing ache spread through her body, dull at first, then sharper as her mind clawed its way toward consciousness. Her limbs felt heavy, almost foreign, as if she had been submerged in thick tar. The distant beeping of machines echoed around her, the sterile scent of antiseptics filling her nostrils. The rhythmic whoosh of a ventilator whispered in the silence. She wasn't dead. That was her first relief. But where was she? What had happened? Then it came back. The screech of tires, the weightless moment of helpless acceleration, and the sudden impact that shattered her world. She had been driving home late, the city skyline a blur beyond her windshield. Her phone had rung. Nathan's voice had been tight with urgency. "Maddie, there's a crisis at the firm. I need you to come in right now." She had barely had time to ask what was wrong before the call ended abruptly. She had turned her car around, her mind already racing through possible problems. A lawsuit, a financial discrepancy, a deal collapsing. Whatever it was, she had needed to fix it. That was what she did. She built, she solved, she saved things. But then, her hands gripping the wheel, she had pressed the brake pedal, expecting resistance. Instead, there had been nothing. The pedal had sunk to the floor, useless. Her heart had slammed against her ribs. The car had surged forward, a speeding bullet on an empty stretch of road. She had yanked the wheel, but the guardrail had been coming too fast. The last thing she remembered was the sickening crunch of metal, the violent lurch of gravity as she plunged downward, and the blackness that swallowed her whole. And now she was here, alive, somehow. Footsteps approached, the door to her hospital room opening with a soft creak. She willed her eyes to open, but they refused, as if weighted shut by unseen hands. Her body remained frozen, trapped in an invisible prison. How is she today? Nathan. Her husband's voice, warm and smooth, edged with something that almost sounded like concern. Relief flooded her. He was here. He must have been worried sick. "No change, Mr. Carter," a woman's voice answered. "Likely a nurse. Her vitals remain stable, but there's been no sign of responsiveness. The doctor will be in shortly." "Thank you," Nathan said. But there was something odd in his tone. Forced, tight. Madeline tried again to move, to give some indication that she was awake. But her body betrayed her. She heard the soft shuffle of footsteps as the nurse left, the door closing behind her. Then, another sound, a different voice. "Is she still out?" Madeline's pulse stuttered. She knew that voice. Sabrina Lopez. Her assistant. Completely unconscious, Nathan murmured. "Doctor says she might never wake up." A silence stretched, thick with something dangerous. Then, Sabrina giggled. "So, our plan worked." Madeline's blood ran cold. Nathan sighed, his voice dropping into something darker, almost amused. "Better than we expected. Brake failure at the perfect moment. Now we just have to wait. Nature will take its course." A rustle of fabric, a soft, lingering kiss. "You're brilliant," Sabrina whispered. "I knew you could pull it off." The heart monitor betrayed her, the steady beep skipping slightly. Madeline forced herself to breathe evenly, desperately suppressing the sheer terror clawing up her throat. "Careful," Nathan murmured. "Even like this, she's still causing problems." Sabrina huffed. "How long do we have to wait?" "Not long," Nathan assured her. "I've already spoken to her attorneys. Power of attorney is mine now. The properties, the bank accounts, everything. And once it's official..." There was another rustle. A quiet, knowing laugh. "A conversation with the doctors about quality of life," Sabrina purred. "About how she wouldn't want to live like this. You always said she was so pragmatic." "Lucky for her," Nathan mused. "Lucky for us." Madeline felt bile rise in her throat. It hadn't been an accident. Her husband had tried to kill her. And now he was waiting for the chance to finish what he had started. Madeline forced herself to stay still. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to react, to scream, to fight. But she knew she couldn't. If Nathan or Sabrina even suspected she was awake, they would make sure she never got another chance to open her eyes. Her mind raced, grasping at possibilities. She was helpless now, her body a traitorous prison, but she wouldn't be forever. She had survived the crash, and she would survive this. But first, she had to play her part. Nathan sighed dramatically, his fingers drumming against the railing of her bed. "You know, it's almost poetic," he mused. "She spent her whole life fighting, always in control, always the one calling the shots. And now, she's nothing," Sabrina finished for him. "Nothing. Nothing." Madeline wanted to scream. She had built everything. The real estate empire, the wealth, the influence. It had all been her. Nathan had been nothing more than a polished ornament, the perfect husband for public appearances, the charming plus. One at charity galas. One at charity galas. She had mistaken his charm for love. How had she been so blind? Sabrina's heels clicked against the hospital floor. "I still can't believe how easy it was." Nathan chuckled. "People believe what they want to believe." Loving husband devastated by wife's tragic accident. They eat that stuff up. "You should win an Oscar," Sabrina teased. "Oh, just wait," Nathan murmured. "Once she's gone, once everything's signed over, I'll have an even better performance lined up." The grieving widower. Tragic, heartbroken, desperately carrying on her legacy. Madeline fought to control her breathing. Each word was like a knife carving into her, but she had to focus. She had spent her entire career outmaneuvering men who underestimated her. Nathan had just made the biggest mistake of his life, assuming she was weak. "Speaking of which," Nathan continued, "we should probably start making moves on the Miami properties. If we sell them off in pieces, no one will question it. By the time they realize anything's missing, it'll be too late." "And the company?" Sabrina asked. "The board is already bending over backward to accommodate me," Nathan said smugly. "Everyone thinks I'm stepping in to honor her vision. If anything, they pity me." Sabrina laughed softly. "I always told you that you deserve better." Madeline felt the rage coil in her stomach. Better. He had everything because of her. Sabrina sighed. "So when's the doctor signing off on this whole quality of life discussion?" Nathan exhaled sharply. "Soon. I need to make sure I have everything squared away first. It's not just about the money. It's about control. Once she's officially gone, I want it clean. No loose ends." Sabrina hummed in approval, and until then, Nathan leaned in closer. Madeline could feel his presence near her, the scent of his cologne suddenly suffocating. "We wait," he said simply. "But not for long." Madeline heard the rustle of fabric, the unmistakable sound of a kiss. Then, the door opened again, and she heard the voice of a nurse. "Mr. Carter," the woman said, her voice polite but firm. "Visiting hours are ending soon." Nathan tasked. "Of course. I just wanted to spend a little more time with my wife." Madeline had to give him credit. He was good. His voice held just the right amount of pain, the practiced hesitation of a devoted husband struggling with the unbearable weight of loss. "Of course," the nurse said, sympathetically. "I'll give you a moment." The door closed again, and Madeline felt Nathan's fingers brush against her hand. She nearly recoiled. "Sleep tight, darling," he murmured. "Not that you have a choice." Sabrina chuckled softly as the two of them left. The door clicked shut. The room fell silent. Madeline let out a slow, careful breath. She was alone. She had time to think. She had time to plan. If Nathan thought she was powerless, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The next time the door opened, the footsteps were measured, deliberate, not Nathan's casual arrogance or Sabrina's impatient clicking heels. Madeline kept her breathing slow and steady, the way she had practiced in the long hours of solitude, her ears attuned to every detail. A hand adjusted her IV, then the soft, rustling sound of notes being scribbled. The scent of aftershave, faint but distinct, drifted toward her. A man cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter," the voice said softly, a low murmur meant only for her. Something in the tone sent a ripple through her. It wasn't Nathan. It wasn't one of the usual nurses. "I know you can't hear me," the voice continued, almost hesitant. "But if you could, I'd tell you I have my doubts about all of this." Her pulse picked up, just slightly, but the machine registered it. A pause followed, the weight of hesitation settling in the air. "Interesting," the voice murmured. "I wonder." A hand gently touched her wrist as though feeling for something beneath the surface. The contact was light, testing. "If you can hear me," the man said slowly, "give me a sign." Madeline focused every ounce of energy on the one thing she could control. A single tear. It slipped from the corner of her eye, trailing warm against her cold skin. The hand on her wrist tensed. A sharp inhale. Another pause. "Mrs. Carter," the voice said. "Lower now. Urgent." "Can you do that again?" Madeline pushed herself harder, fighting against the overwhelming exhaustion. This one, deliberate. The hand pulled away. A moment later, something cool dabbed at her cheek. A cloth, maybe. A sharp exhale. "You're in there," the voice whispered. "Aren't you?" Silence stretched between them. Then a chair scraped closer. "My name is Dr. Daniel Hayes," the man said, now with quiet certainty. "I'm overseeing your case. Your husband. He's been very vocal about your condition." Madeline's heart pounded in her chest. She forced herself to stay still. "He wants to terminate life support," Hayes continued, his voice turning careful, measured. "But I don't believe in making that decision lightly." Madeline wanted to scream, to plead, to beg him to help her, but she remained trapped in this unforgiving prison of her own body. "You're hearing me," Hayes said, as if speaking more to himself now. "That much is clear." He leaned in, his voice just above a whisper. "If I'm right, if you understand me, I need you to prove it." A beat of silence. Then, summoning every ounce of focus, Madeline willed her index finger to move. Just a twitch. The smallest motion, but enough. Hayes sucked in a breath. "Jesus, Jesus." She did it again, this time with more effort. Hayes moved quickly, pressing a careful hand to her shoulder, grounding her. "All right. Slow down. I believe you. He hesitated, then said, If you understand me, move your finger again. She obeyed, and Hayes let out a slow exhale, like a man who had just uncovered a dangerous truth. This changes everything, he murmured. Madeline wanted to sob in relief, but she didn't dare. She wasn't safe yet. Hayes was silent for a long moment, then finally spoke. Your husband doesn't know, does he? Her finger remained still. I see. He sat back, exhaling heavily. That single truth settled between them, undeniable. Hayes shifted in his seat, deep in thought. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, If you trust me, Mrs. Carter, I can keep this between us. But I need to know. Do you want me to? Madeline curled her finger inward. The answer was yes. Hayes exhaled sharply. All right, he murmured. Then let's make sure your husband never sees this coming. Dr. Hayes sat back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly against the clipboard in his lap. He was quiet for a moment, thinking, calculating. Madeline kept her breathing slow and steady, though inside, every nerve in her body was alight with anticipation. This was it, the first real chance she'd had since the accident. And she couldn't afford to let it slip away. I'm going to need help, Hayes murmured, mostly to himself. Then he leaned in again, his voice softer, more deliberate. Listen to me, Mrs. Carter. I can keep this secret for now, but I can't do it alone. I need someone I trust. Someone who can be in this room when I'm not. Madeline's pulse quickened slightly. She forced her body to remain still. Hayes sat back, rubbing his jaw in thought. There's a nurse, he said, still speaking low. Lisa Monroe. Lisa Monroe. She's been on your rotation since you were admitted. I trust her. The name rang faintly in Madeline's mind. She had no clear memory of her, but she had heard the woman's voice during check-ins. Soft-spoken, gentle. I'll bring her in tonight when no one else is around, Hayes continued. If you trust me, trust her. We're going to find a way to protect you. Madeline focused every ounce of strength into one tiny motion. Another twitch of her index finger. Hayes gave a quiet chuckle, but there was no humor in it. That's what I thought. He stood, straightening his coat, then took her wrist between his fingers, as if checking her pulse. If anyone walked in, it would look routine. But then, barely above a whisper, he murmured, Play dead a little longer, Mrs. Carter. They won't see you coming. And then he was gone. The hours dragged in silence, the walls of the hospital room closing in. Madeline had never felt so helpless, yet so dangerously close to reclaiming her life. She didn't know this nurse, Lisa, but she knew one thing for certain. If certain, Hayes trusted her, then she had to as well. The door creaked open again, well past midnight. The room was dark except for the glow of the machine surrounding her. Soft footsteps approached, lighter than Hayes's, but careful, hesitant. Then, a quiet whisper. Mrs. Carter? Madeline stayed still, waiting. Lisa let out a slow breath. Dr. Hayes told me what happened, she murmured, stepping closer. That you're awake. That you can hear me. The hesitation in her voice was clear. She wanted proof. Madeline, exhausted but determined, curled her finger. A sharp inhale. Then, a soft laugh of disbelief.
Oh my God,
Lisa whispered. Madeline did it again, slower this time, just to be sure Lisa saw it. A chair scraped closer as Lisa sat beside her, the air between them charged with unspoken understanding. I don't know how you've managed to stay quiet this long, she murmured, her voice edged with something between admiration and sorrow. After what they did to you, what they're planning to do. Madeline wanted to scream, to pour out everything, but her body was still a traitor. Lisa exhaled sharply. We don't have much time. Dr. Hayes has been stalling, but your husband is pushing hard for a decision on your care. If they approve removing life support. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Madeline forced her finger to move again. A question. Lisa seemed to understand. He has a meeting with the ethics board in 3 days. That's when they'll decide. 3 days. Not much time at all. Lisa hesitated. Hayes said you need more than just time. You need a way to fight back. Do you have someone on the outside? Someone who might help? Madeline's mind raced. Did she? Nathan had isolated her from so many people, controlling who she trusted. But then a name surfaced. Alex Brooks. Her CFO. Her closest ally in business. A man who had been there from the beginning. If anyone could help her take back control, it was him. Madeline curled her finger, willing Lisa to understand. Lisa frowned, thinking. A name? You want to tell me a name? Another twitch. Okay, she whispered. We'll figure it out. Just hang on. She reached out, carefully placing a warm hand over Madeline's motionless one. You're not alone anymore, Mrs. Carter. And we're not going to let them win. Lisa kept her promise. The next night, she returned, her presence careful and quiet, but this time she carried something with her, a small notepad and a pen. I've been thinking about how to communicate with you, she murmured, settling into the chair beside Madeline's bed. Blinking might take too much energy, and I don't want to risk raising suspicion if someone walks in. So let's try this. She gently placed the pen in Madeline's hand, closing her fingers around it. If you can, try to squeeze it, she encouraged. Madeline summoned all her focus. Her muscles felt useless, drained from weeks of inactivity, but she pushed through the numbness, willing her fingers to tighten just slightly. Lisa let out a breath of relief. Good. That's good. She pressed the notepad against Madeline's palm, positioning the pen's tip just above the paper. I know writing is too much right now, but if I go through the alphabet and stop at the right letter, could you try to make a mark? Madeline steadied herself. It would take time, but it was a start. Lisa began, her voice soft. B, C. At nothing. B, nothing. But at L, Madeline pressed down, barely making a mark. Lisa froze, then whispered, L. Another small press of the pen. Okay, she breathed. L, she continued. At E, another faint push. Lisa's eyes widened. L, A. She continued, voice steady but urgent. A, E, B, C, D. A press at X. Lex? Lisa asked, frowning. Then realization dawned. No. Alex. Madeline pressed harder than before. Lisa sat back, exhaling in relief.
Alex? Okay. Alex who?
It took time, but Madeline forced out the next letters. D, R, O. Lisa's eyes flickered with recognition. Alex Brooks. The CFO. Another confirmation. Lisa gave a small, determined nod. That's good. That's really good. I can get a message to him, but it has to be subtle. Your husband has been keeping a close eye on who visits. Madeline felt frustration coil inside her. Nathan. Even in her absence, he was controlling everything. Lisa hesitated. Alex was already suspicious, you know. She leaned in slightly. I overheard your husband arguing with him outside your room last week. Alex kept demanding updates, but Nathan shut him down. Told him he wasn't authorized to check in on you. Madeline's grip on the pen tightened just slightly. That sounded like Alex. Lisa... All right. I'll find a way to reach him. The door suddenly clicked open. Lisa straightened instantly, slipping the notepad and pen into her pocket just as footsteps entered the room. Evening, Nurse Monroe. Nathan. Nathan. Lisa turned, her face unreadable. Mr. Carter, she greeted politely. Madeline remained perfectly still, controlling her breathing as Nathan approached. Just checking in on my wife, Nathan murmured, his voice thick with manufactured sorrow. He moved closer, fingers trailing along Madeline's arm, a mockery of affection. I keep hoping for a miracle. Lisa stayed composed. Her condition is stable, she replied neutrally. Nathan hummed, tilting his head. Strange, isn't it? Lisa blinked. Strange? How the human body works, Nathan mused. She's just... here. Not really alive, not really gone. He let out a hollow sigh. I keep wondering if I should let go. Lisa tensed. That's a conversation for the ethics board, Mr. Carter. Nathan chuckled lightly, stepping back. Of course. Just thinking out loud. He lingered another moment and finally turned for the door. Oh, he added over his shoulder. I appreciate your dedication, Nurse Monroe. It's nice to know someone's looking out for my wife. Lisa forced a polite smile. Ah. Nathan said nothing else as he left, but the room felt colder in his absence. Lisa let out a slow breath, then glanced at Madeline. Their eyes met. At least Lisa's met hers. I don't like him, Lisa murmured. Madeline wanted to laugh, but all she could do was press the pen into Lisa's palm. A silent agreement. Lisa exhaled. I'll get to Alex. Madeline had no choice but to trust her. Lisa was true to her word. The next night, she returned, her presence quieter than before. This time, her expression carried something new, urgency. I found him, she whispered as she settled into the chair beside Madeline's bed. Alex? Madeline's pulse spiked slightly, the heart monitor betraying her excitement. Lisa took that as confirmation. I couldn't talk to him directly. Your husband has security watching the hospital entrances, making sure no one unauthorized comes near you. But I found another way. She pulled something from her pocket, a folded piece of paper. I slipped him a note through a contact at the company, a woman named Evelyn Incher. She owed me a favor, so I had her deliver it during his lunch break. Lisa hesitated. I kept it vague, just in case. But I wrote enough to get his attention. Told him he needed to meet me, that it was about you, and that things weren't as they seemed. Madeline wished she could reach out and grip Lisa's hand, force her to say more. Lisa exhaled, running a hand through her hair. He showed up. I met him in a coffee shop across the street. He was suspicious, on edge. I think he already knew something was wrong. She leaned in, lowering her voice. I told him I was your nurse, and that I had reason to believe your accident wasn't an accident at all. Madeline felt a rush of cold run through her body. Lisa gave a grim smile. His reaction told me everything I needed to know. He already had doubts. He told me Nathan had been making moves at the company, selling off properties, pushing through changes that didn't make sense. But the worst part, she looked Madeline in the eye. He fired Alex. The heart monitor jumped. Lisa nodded. Your husband is getting rid of anyone who could challenge him. Alex said he was locked out of all internal systems the moment he was dismissed. No warning. Madeline burned with silent fury. Nathan wasn't just stealing from her. He was erasing her. Everything she built, everyone loyal to her, being stripped away piece by piece. Lisa reached out, gripping Madeline's fingers gently. Alex isn't giving up, though. He said he's been looking into Nathan's financials ever since the accident, but it's been hard. Nathan covered his tracks well. A pause. Madeline forced herself to stay perfectly still. Lisa's fingers tightened slightly around hers. There's a man. Keeps coming by the hospital asking about you. Security won't let him in. Nathan made sure of that. But he doesn't stop trying. She hesitated before continuing. His name is Ryan Grant. He says he was there when your car went over the bridge. He says he pulled you out before the wreck caught fire. Madeline's breath hitched. A memory surfaced, blurry, fragmented, cold hands gripping her arms, dragging her through water. A voice rough but steady. Hold on. Lisa studied her face. You remember him, don't you? Madeline pressed her fingers against Lisa's palm. Lisa nodded slowly. Then, I need to find a way to talk to him. Nathan's got security watching the hospital, but I think I can reach out through someone at the shelter where I volunteer. He goes there sometimes. If he has information on what really happened that night. We need it. The idea of Ryan, the man who had saved her, being out there, trying to help, sent a surge of hope through Madeline. Lisa exhaled, her voice filled with quiet determination. Between him and Alex, we might just have a chance. Madeline squeezed her hand, a silent message. Then, let's take it. Lisa returned the next evening, but this time, the weight in her expression was heavier. She sat beside Madeline's bed, glancing at the door before leaning in close. We're running out of time, she whispered. Madeline felt her pulse quicken. Lisa exhaled sharply. Nathan's moving faster than we thought. He met with a specialist today, a doctor from another hospital, someone who isn't as ethical as Dr. Hayes. Her jaw clenched. He's pushing for the ethics committee to approve removing life support, and this new doctor, he's agreeing. Madeline's stomach twisted. Lisa hesitated. The meeting is tomorrow morning. Tomorrow. Madeline's breathing remained steady, but inside, she felt something dangerously close to panic. I overheard them talking, Lisa continued, her voice tight with anger. Nathan played his part perfectly. Told them you were a strong, independent woman who would never want to live this way. That he had to honor your wishes. She shook her head, and the worst part, some of them believed him. Madeline wanted to scream, to claw her way out of this useless shell of a body and rip Nathan's lies apart. Lisa took a breath, calming herself. Dr. Hayes is going to fight it, but he's one voice against an entire panel. We need more than his word. She hesitated before continuing. That's why I took a risk today. Madeline stilled. Lisa looked her straight in the eyes. I met with Ryan. A sharp jolt ran through Madeline, her pulse betraying her. Lisa nodded. I tracked him down through the shelter. He wasn't hard to find. He's been watching the hospital, waiting for a chance to see you. Madeline swallowed, her mind flashing back to that broken memory. The feeling of being pulled from the wreck, the distant sound of sirens, a voice telling her to hold on. Lisa's grip tightened on her wrist. Madeline, He remembers everything. He was there before the paramedics, and he told me something that changes everything. Madeline focused, waiting. Lisa took a breath. Nathan showed up at the accident scene way too fast. Madeline's world tilted. Lisa continued. Ryan got you out of the car just in time. But when the paramedics arrived, Nathan was already there, calm. Not panicked, not frantic, not acting like a man who had just lost his wife in a horrific crash. She leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. It was like he was waiting for it to happen. Madeline's heart slammed against her ribs. Lisa kept going. Ryan tried to approach him, but Nathan brushed him off. Acted like he was just some homeless guy in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Ryan knew something was off. He started watching, listening. She exhaled, and then he heard Nathan talking to someone a few days later. At your dealership. Vanessa was with him. Madeline felt her fingers twitch involuntarily. Lisa's eyes darkened. They were celebrating. A sickening weight settled in Madeline's chest. Lisa's voice hardened. Ryan heard them talking about the brakes, about how the mechanic did a flawless job, how it would have been cleaner if you had died in the crash. Madeline's pulse spiked, the monitor beeping slightly faster. Lisa placed a steadying hand on her wrist. It gets better. Madeline forced herself to focus. Lisa exhaled. Ryan went to the junkyard where your car was taken after the accident. Security was light. Hey, found something. She pulled a small plastic bag from her pocket, holding it up for Madeline to see. Inside were pieces of metal tubing, cut, damaged, worn, in unnatural ways. The brake line, Lisa whispered. Madeline's breath hitched. Lisa nodded. Ryan took it before they could destroy the evidence. The mechanic thought he covered his tracks, but these, she turned the bag slightly. There are tool marks that show it wasn't normal wear and tear. Someone cut these. Madeline's vision swam with rage. Lisa tucked the bag away. Ryan's willing to go to the police, but he knows that won't be enough. If Nathan has people in his pocket, this could disappear fast. She took a steadying breath. That's why we need more. We need something that no one can deny. Madeline didn't move, didn't blink. She knew exactly what Lisa meant. A confession. Nathan had been so cocky, so sure of himself. He had whispered his crimes over her bed, believing she was gone. If they could capture that. Lisa saw the shift in Madeline's expression and nodded. I'm already working on it. She leaned in once more, voice firm. Just hold on, Madeline. By this time, tomorrow, we'll have a plan. And when we do, her fingers curled gently over Madeline's. We'll make him pay. Lisa returned the next evening, but this time, there was something electric in her movements. A quiet urgency, a glimmer of determination in her eyes. She barely sat down before leaning in close. We're ready, she whispered. Madeline's pulse spiked. Lisa exhaled sharply, glancing at the door before pulling a small, sleek device from her pocket. It was no larger than a pin, but when she turned it in the dim hospital light, Madeline immediately understood what it was. A recording device. Lisa set it on the edge of the bedside table, her fingers ghosting over it. This has a high-sensitivity mic. It'll pick up everything within 10 feet. If we place it here, it'll capture every word Nathan and Vanessa say when they think they're alone with you. Madeline felt a rush of something dangerously close to triumph. Lisa continued, her voice steady but urgent. The plan is simple. We record them. They're arrogant enough to keep talking, and when they do, we'll get everything. Airy confession, Every smug little remark about how they planned your death. She tucked the recorder into place, securing it beneath the table with adhesive. I already tested it. It's nearly invisible unless you know where to look. It'll run for hours. We'll just need to swap it out when the battery runs low. Madeline let her fingers twitch slightly, a silent acknowledgement. Lisa sat back, watching her. "I know this is risky," she murmured, "but this is our best shot. Nathan thinks he's won. He's careless. He talks too much when he's gloating." She hesitated. "And Vanessa. She's even worse. She wants this over, and she's not afraid to push him." Madeline already knew it was true. She had listened in silence while Vanessa whined about how long this was taking, how she wanted Madeline gone. Lisa sighed. "If we do this right, we'll have enough evidence to take to the district attorney." And with Ryan's brake line evidence, she gave a small shake of her head. Nathan won't be able to talk his way out of this. Madeline felt her heartbeat steady. She had spent weeks as a prisoner in her own body, listening to them plot her death. The idea that their own arrogance would be their undoing was almost poetic. Lisa adjusted the blankets over Madeline's still form, making sure nothing seemed out of place. "Now we wait." She met Madeline's eyes. "And when the time comes, we end this." The next afternoon, they came. Nathan's voice was the first thing she heard. "By this time, tomorrow, it'll all be done." Vanessa's heels clicked against the tile. "Finally," she muttered. "I was beginning to think she'd outlive both of us." Nathan chuckled. "Not a chance." Madeline kept her body perfectly still, her breathing controlled. Every word they spoke was being recorded. "She should have died in that crash," Vanessa grumbled. "If the brakes had failed properly, we wouldn't even be dealing with this." Nathan exhaled dramatically. "Don't remind me. I paid that idiot mechanic a fortune to get it right." The recording device caught every word. Vanessa scoffed. "At least tomorrow, we won't have to fake sympathy anymore. I'm sick of playing the grieving wife to be while you play the devastated husband." Nathan chuckled darkly. "Oh, don't pretend you're not enjoying spending her money already." Madeline clenched her fingers, so small, so slight that no one would notice. They had everything. Nathan let out a satisfied sigh. "Once they pull the plug, we're free." Vanessa laughed softly. "And rich." Nathan's voice dropped lower. "And no one will ever know what we did." Madeline knew better. Because by this time tomorrow, Nathan would realize just how wrong he was. Lisa entered the room just after midnight, moving with quiet precision. She barely glanced at Madeline before her fingers found the underside of the bedside table, retrieving the small recording device she had placed there hours earlier. The room was silent, except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, but Madeline could feel the tension crackling in the air. Lisa's expression was unreadable as she pulled a second device from her pocket and swapped them, securing the fresh recorder in the exact same spot before slipping the used one into her scrubs. For a moment, she just stood there staring at Madeline. Then she exhaled slowly. Madeline's pulse quickened. Lisa glanced at the door before perching on the edge of the chair. "I haven't had a chance to listen to everything yet, but I caught enough while switching them out." Nathan admitted to everything. The breaks, the forged documents, even how he paid the mechanic. It's all there. Madeline's chest tightened. Lisa ran a hand through her hair, her fingers shaking slightly. It was almost too easy, she murmured. They didn't even try to hide it. It's like they enjoyed talking about how they planned to kill you. Madeline already knew that. She had listened in silence for weeks, while Nathan and Vanessa laughed over her impending death. But hearing Lisa say it aloud, knowing the evidence was real, made it feel different. Final. Lisa took a deep breath. Ryan's on his way to meet Alex right now. They'll go through the recording, then take it straight to Detective Rivera. Her eyes flicked to Madeline's face. This is it. Once they hear this, there's no way Nathan walks away from this. Madeline wanted to feel relief. She wanted to believe this nightmare was finally coming to an end. But then Lisa's expression darkened. There's one problem, she said quietly. Madeline forced herself to stay still. Lisa swallowed hard. Nathan's pushing to have your life support removed first thing in the morning. Madeline's breath stalled. Lisa nodded grimly. I overheard him talking to the specialist he brought in. They're finalizing the paperwork now. Nathan thinks if they do it before noon, he can take over the company before anyone questions it. Madeline's mind spun. Lisa reached for her hand, gripping it gently. We'll stop it, she promised. But we need to move fast. Ryan and Alex should have everything to Rivera within a few hours. But there's no guarantee the hospital will hold off on the procedure before an arrest is made. She hesitated. Dr. Hayes is doing everything he can to stall, but if Nathan pushes hard enough, he might not be able to stop it. Madeline knew what that meant. If Nathan's arrest didn't happen before the hospital made their decision, there was a very real chance she wouldn't be alive to see justice served. Lisa's fingers tightened around hers. I won't let that happen, she whispered. We just need to hold on a little longer. Madeline's heart pounded in her chest, the beeping of the monitor slightly erratic. Lisa squeezed her hand once more, then stood, her face set with fierce determination. By this time, tomorrow, Nathan won't have control over anything. Not your life, not your company. She took a breath. By this time tomorrow, he'll be the one fighting to survive. And with that, she slipped out of the room, leaving Madeline alone with the knowledge that by morning, one of them wouldn't walk away from this. She just had to make sure it wasn't Nathan. The next afternoon, Nathan arrived at the hospital, exactly on schedule. His voice was the first thing Madeline heard, smooth and confident as ever, filling the sterile room like the echo of a well-rehearsed lie. As you can see, counselor, he said, his tone laced with fausse grief. My wife's condition remains unchanged. Footsteps shuffled behind him. A third voice, likely the lawyer he had brought to finalize the last of the transfers, spoke with careful neutrality. And you're certain this is what she would have wanted? Nathan let out a heavy sigh. Absolutely. Madeline was always clear. She didn't believe in lingering like this. She valued control, decisiveness. His voice lowered, feigning sorrow. It's the hardest decision I've ever made, but I have to honor her wishes. Madeline nearly scoffed. The only wishes he had ever honored were his own. Well, the lawyer continued, then let's review the final transfer documents for the company holdings. Once these are signed, everything will be legally under your control. Madeline kept her breathing steady. This was it. The moment they had planned for. The rustling of papers, the scrape of a chair. Just to confirm, the lawyer went on. These transfers are being done under the power of attorney your wife granted you prior to her accident. That's correct, Nathan said smoothly. She trusted me implicitly. Madeline wanted to laugh. The timing is convenient, the lawyer remarked. Having these completed before tomorrow's procedure will simplify things considerably. Yes, Nathan agreed. It's what Madeline would have wanted. It was the casual ease of his words that pushed her over the edge. Slowly, deliberately, Madeline opened her eyes. The light was blinding at first, a sharp contrast to the weeks of enforced darkness. But she didn't blink. Not yet. Instead, she spoke. "I wouldn't want that at all, Nathan." The reaction was instant. The lawyer dropped his pen. Vanessa let out a choked gasp. And Nathan turned slowly, his face draining of color as he stared at the woman he thought was as good as dead. Madeline held his gaze, unwavering. Her voice was rough, unused for too long, but the weight of it was enough. "Surprised?" Nathan's lips parted, but no sound came out. His entire body had gone rigid, his once perfect posture betraying the sheer horror radiating off of him. That's impossible," he whispered. Madeline ignored him. She focused on Vanessa instead, watching the other woman pale beneath her makeup. "Oh, don't stop on my account," she said, her voice stronger now. "You were just about to finalize my murder, weren't you?" Vanessa staggered backward, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. She's confused," she stammered. "She doesn't know what she's saying." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm saying." Madeline let the room settle into thick silence before tilting her head slightly toward the bedside table. "Isn't that right, Detective Rivera?" Another shift. The door opened. Detective Rivera stepped inside, flanked by two uniformed officers. Her expression was calm, but her eyes burned with quiet satisfaction. "Mr. Carter," she said coolly, "we need to have a word." Nathan finally moved, his head snapping toward the detective. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "My wife, she's been unconscious for weeks. She's confused, disoriented." "Oh, she's not confused," Rivera interrupted, holding up a small black device. "We've got it all right here. Every conversation, every confession. You really should learn not to gloat, Nathan." Madeline watched as the color drained even further from his face. The room exploded into movement. One of the officers stepped forward, reaching for Nathan's wrist. "Nathan Carter, you are under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy." Vanessa let out a strangled shriek. "No, no, no! Nathan, do something!" Nathan lunged. Not at Rivera, not at the officers. At Madeline. For a second, the world tilted. His face contorted with rage, his hands reaching. Then a blur of movement. Nathan was yanked back before he could touch her, his body slammed against the floor. "Ryan." Madeline blinked, her vision sharpening just in time to see Ryan Grant pressing his knee into Nathan's back, holding him down as the officers secured the handcuffs. Nathan fought. "You think this is over?" he snarled, his voice shaking with fury. "You think you've won?" Madeline met his glare with a calm she hadn't felt in weeks. "Oh, Nathan," she murmured, "you never had a chance." And then, with the finality of a cell door slamming shut, the officers dragged him away. The room was eerily quiet once Nathan was dragged away. For the first time in weeks, Madeline felt like she could breathe without the weight of unseen danger pressing down on her chest. But the battle wasn't over yet. Vanessa still stood frozen near the door, her eyes darting wildly between Madeline, Detective Rivera, and the officers who had just taken Nathan away. She had always been the more impulsive one, the one with a fragile confidence that only held when things were going her way. But now she was unraveling. Madeline tilted her head slightly, watching Vanessa's lip tremble as reality set in. You can't do this," Vanessa sputtered, her voice shaking. "You don't have anything on me." Rivera arched a brow. "Oh, we have plenty," she said, holding up the recorder Lisa had planted. "Your voice is just as clear as his." Vanessa staggered back as if struck. "No," she whispered. "No, Nathan was the one who planned it. I didn't." Madeline cut her off. "You knew," she said, her voice hoarse but certain. "You laughed. You celebrated." Vanessa's breath hitched. You wanted me dead just as much as he did." Madeline let the words settle before adding, "But now, you're alone." Vanessa broke. "Wait," she shrieked, spinning toward Rivera. "Wait. I have proof. I can help." Rivera didn't blink. "Oh, I know you can." Madeline watched as Vanessa's shoulders slumped in defeat. She would fold. She would fold. She always had less to lose than Nathan, and now that her perfect future had been ripped away, she would save herself however she could. One of the officers stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Vanessa's arm. "Vanessa Lopez, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and accessory to attempted homicide." Vanessa let out a soft, broken sob, but she didn't fight. As they led her away, Madeline felt no sympathy. By the time the room was empty, except for Lisa, Ryan, and Rivera, the weight of it all finally hit. It was over. Nathan and Vanessa were gone. Lisa exhaled loudly, rubbing her forehead. "Oh," she muttered, giving Madeline a shaky smile. "You really pulled it off." Ryan let out a short, humorless chuckle. "You should have seen Nathan's face," he said. "For a second, I thought he was going to faint." Madeline huffed out something that was almost a laugh. Her throat was raw, her body weak, but she was alive. Rivera tucked the recorder into an evidence bag. "With what we have, they're not getting out of this," she assured them. "Nathan is facing multiple life sentences. Vanessa won't get off easy either, even if she cooperates." Madeline nodded slowly, absorbing the words. Lisa cleared her throat. "So, what now?" Madeline knew the answer immediately. She turned her head slightly toward Ryan. "You said he was already selling off my company," she murmured, her voice still rough but gaining strength. "How much damage did he do?" Ryan glanced at Lisa before answering, "A lot. But Alex has been keeping track of everything. Most of it can be undone." Madeline set her jaw.
Then that's what we do.
Lisa smiled. "You're already thinking about rebuilding?" Madeline's gaze sharpened. "I never stopped." For weeks, she had been silent, trapped, waiting. But Nathan had underestimated her. He thought that once she was out of the picture, he could erase her existence, take what she built, twist it into something he could claim as his own. But Madeline Carter wasn't gone. She was back. And she was about to take back everything. 3 weeks later, Madeline Carter walked into her company's headquarters. It felt surreal. The last time she had been here, she had been unaware of the danger lurking beside her, the betrayal of the man she once trusted. Now, she stood at the entrance, supported by a cane but standing tall, strong, unbroken. Beside her, Alex Brooks adjusted his tie, a smirk tugging at his lips. "You know, you could have waited a little longer before coming back," he mused. "I mean, you technically cheated death. Most people would take a vacation." Madeline gave him a sharp glance. Most people didn't have their entire empire stolen out from under them while they were in a coma. Alex chuckled. "Fair point." She took a deep breath, stepping inside. The hushed whispers started almost immediately. Employees froze in their tracks. Some gasped audibly, Others simply stared, wide-eyed and pale. It made sense. For weeks, Nathan had fed them the narrative that she was as good as dead, that it was only a matter of time before she passed peacefully. But now she was here. A woman stepped forward, her face a mixture of shock and relief. Mrs. Carter. Madeline held up a hand, silencing her gently. Then she turned to face the employees who had gathered in the main lobby, watching her like she was a ghost returned from the grave. "I know a lot has happened in my absence," Madeline said, her voice clear, unwavering. "But let me be very clear. This company is mine. It always has been." She let her gaze sweep across the room. "Some of you stayed loyal," she continued. "Some of you." A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. Madeline exhaled slowly. "If you were part of what Nathan Carter did, if you helped him forge documents, if you signed off on his illegal deals, resign now. Before I find out myself." Silence. Then, movement. A handful of guilty-looking executives shuffled uncomfortably before turning on their heels and heading for the elevators. Madeline didn't stop them. She turned to Alex. "I want a full audit," she ordered. "Every deal Nathan made, every transaction, every forged signature. I want to know exactly how much damage he did." Alex grinned. "Already on it." Madeline took a breath, then walked toward her office. It was strange, stepping back inside. Everything looked untouched, yet she could feel the presence of a man who had tried to erase her. Nathan had sat in this chair, behind this desk, thinking he had won. Madeline lowered herself into the chair slowly, pressing her palms against the polished wood. "Not anymore." Lisa's voice came from the doorway. "You okay?" Madeline glanced up. Lisa stood there, arms crossed, watching her carefully. Madeline smirked. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Lisa stepped inside, placing a thick envelope on the desk. "The final court ruling came in," she said. "Nathan's been officially denied bail. The DA's office is pushing for the maximum sentence." Madeline nodded. "And Vanessa?" Lisa rolled her eyes. "She's spilling everything. But even with her plea deal, she'll be locked up for a long time." Madeline tapped her fingers against the desk. "Good." Lisa hesitated, then smirked. "So, what now?" Madeline leaned back in her chair, and allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. "Now," she repeated. "Now I take back everything they tried to steal." Lisa nodded approvingly. And as Madeline looked out over the city she had fought to reclaim, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't just surviving. She was winning. Lesson learned from Madeline's story. Madeline Carter's story is more than just a tale of survival and revenge. It's a lesson in strength, resilience, and the power of the truth. She faced the ultimate betrayal, not from a stranger, but from the person she trusted most. Yet, instead of breaking, she adapted, endured, and outsmarted her enemies. One of the most important takeaways: never underestimate your own power. Even when everything seemed lost, when she had no voice, no control, and no way to fight back, she found a way. She turned her silence into strategy, her patience into a weapon, and when the moment was right, she struck with undeniable force. Her journey also highlights the importance of loyalty and the right people in your corner. Alone, she wouldn't have made it, but with the help of people who genuinely cared. Lisa, Alex, Ryan, she reclaimed not just her business, but her life. Betrayal is painful, but rising after it, that's power. What did you think of this story? Let us know in the comments. Also, where are you watching from? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an incredible story like this. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply taking back what's yours.